My own father pointed at me in front of 200 people and told me to leave before I embarrassed him. And he had no idea he was talking to the woman who had saved his entire career 6 months earlier. I want you to stay with me through every second of this, because what happened in that ballroom that night did not just change one evening. It changed everything. And it started with a letter I found hidden inside a Bible that had been waiting for me for 18 years. My name is Heather Upton. I am 34 years old. I have stood in rooms most people only see on the news, rooms with no windows and no names on the door, rooms where the cost of losing your composure is not embarrassment, but something far worse. None of those rooms scared me the way my father's retirement party did. And I almost did not go. I almost stayed home in Maryland with my boots on and my door locked and let the whole thing happen without me. I almost made the easier choice. I did not. And I need you to understand why. Because the reason I walked into that ballroom is the same reason I am telling you this story. My father is Walter Upton. He spent 30 years building defense programs for Voss Hartley, a company with a name on a building and a senator at every dinner party. He is silver-haired and straight-backed and very good at the kind of warmth that costs him absolutely nothing. He remembers names. He laughs at jokes one beat before they land, which is its own kind of power. He built a life that looked, from the outside, like everything a man is supposed to want. And somewhere inside of that life, he had decided, very early and very permanently, that his youngest daughter was a disappointment. Not a mystery, not an unknown, a settled fact. I was the child who had chosen wrong, who had left the family name on the table and walked into a recruiter's office and thrown away every advantage the Upton name could have bought her. That was the story of me, as told by the people who shared my blood. I had stopped correcting it years ago. Correcting it required explaining things I was not allowed to explain to people who had already chosen the simpler version. So I let them be wrong. It was cheaper than the fight. The party was at the Ashford Club, the kind of venue with chandeliers the size of small cars and a string quartet playing something expensive in the corner. I drove 50 minutes in a borrowed gown that felt like a costume of myself. Under the neckline, on a worn chain, I had my grandfather's dog tags. Pop. Sergeant First Class Raymond Upton. 22 years in service. Gone 15 years now. I touched them at the valet stand the way some people check for keys. Not because I needed to confirm they were there, but because I needed to confirm that I was. The dress was wrong. The venue was wrong. The only thing that was right was the weight of cold metal against my sternum, and I held onto that the whole drive in. There was no place card with my name at the front tables. I was at table 11 in the back, between a retired contractor and an empty chair. The printed program had a gold border and a photograph of my father shaking hands with a senator, and it listed 3 talented children, Brett, Paige, and a gap where a third name should have been. I knew whose decision that was. My sister Paige runs the family foundation and curates the family's reputation the way other people tend gardens, very carefully, and only the flowers that photograph well. A soldier with no rank she could brag about did not fit the centerpiece, so I was trimmed. I sat at table 11 and folded my hands and looked at the stage and told myself I would be gone in an hour. My brother Brett found me before the salads arrived. Brett is 40, 6 years older than me, a vice president at Voss Hartley with a corner office, and a title that means he forwards other people's decisions upward. He smiled at me the way you smile at someone you are not sure of. "Still playing soldier," he said, and he meant it as a compliment, which was worse. He told me about his quarter, his numbers, a deal that almost closed. He talked about himself the way nervous people talk, to keep anyone from getting a word in that might actually land. What he did not say, but what I could read on him clearly, was that he was watching the head table. Margaret Voss, founder and chairman of the company, was in that room, and Brett needed her to see him standing at his father's right hand. He clapped my shoulder on his way to position himself closer to the stage, the pat you give a dog you are not quite sure of, and walked away without asking me a single real question about my life. He had been answering questions about my life for 20 years. He did not need my input. Stay with me, because in about 10 minutes of this story, something is going to happen in that room that no one at that party expected. Not my brother, not my sister, not the senator, and especially not my father. Hit subscribe right now so you do not miss the moment the whole room goes silent, because it is coming, and I want you there when it does. Paige made her pass at me next. She floated over with 2 foundation donors and looked me up and down and said, "We weren't sure you'd come," in that, with a smile so calibrated it could have been framed. One of the donors laughed politely. I told her the dress was borrowed, which was true, and that I was used to a uniform, which was also true, and I let that second sentence sit in the air long enough for the smarter donor to feel uncomfortable. Paige's smile tightened. She moved her donors along like a tour guide steering tourists away from a closed exhibit. I did not chase her. You learn in my line of work that the loudest move is rarely the strongest one. The room was full of people I did not know who all seemed to know versions of me, the versions my brother had narrated over the years. She enlisted, you know how she is. Never really found her footing. He said it kindly, which was the worst part. He said it the way you describe a relative's bad luck, and people nodded, sympathetic, and the story of me got told one more time by a man who had not once asked me a real question about where I had been or what I had done there. I had let him do it for 2 decades. Correcting him meant explaining a job I was not allowed to explain to people who would not have believed it anyway. So the story stood, and I sat at table 11 in my borrowed gown and drank water and watched the room orbit my father and waited for the part of the night I already knew was coming. I found a quiet hallway around 8 o'clock, the way I do at any event that runs longer than an hour, just to stand somewhere no one is performing. And I found my father and my brother already in it. They did not see me. My father had index cards in his hand. He was rehearsing the toast. "Keep it about Brett and Paige," my brother was saying. "The numbers, the foundation, people love that." My father nodded. "And Heather?" he asked, not warmly, just as a logistics problem. Brett laughed. "Honestly, make a joke of it. Light. Something about her roughing it. People will love that too. Better than pretending she's not here." My father looked at the card and at my brother, and I watched him decide something in the space of 2 seconds. "Light," he agreed. I stepped back before the floorboard could give me away, and I walked to the bathroom and ran cold water over my wrists. An old trick for slowing your pulse before something hard. I had come to say a quiet goodbye. I had not planned on being a punchline in the closing remarks. I considered leaving right then. I stood in that bathroom and I thought about it seriously. Slipping out the side door, driving north, letting my dignity stay folded small and intact. That would have been the easy choice. I have walked through a lot of easy doors in this family. Instead, I dried my hands and went back to table 11, because some part of me, the 17-year-old part, still wanted to be in the room for whatever my father had decided I was worth. I did not yet know about the letter. That comes next, and I need you to understand what I found before I tell you what happened on that stage. Because without the letter, none of the rest of it makes the same kind of sense. Earlier that afternoon, before I drove to the club, I had stopped at the house in Wexford. Paige had asked me to pick up a framed photo she wanted on the gift table. Asking me to fetch things is how my sister includes me. The house was the same and smaller, the way childhood houses always are. I let myself in with the key under the 3rd flower pot, the one that has been there since I was 9. While I was picking up the photo, I picked up my mother's Bible without meaning to, just to feel the weight of her in it. A folded sheet of paper slid out from the back and landed on the carpet. My name was on the outside. Heather. Not Brett. Not Paige. Heather, in the careful cursive my mother used when she needed me to listen. My mother, Carol Upton, died when I was 16. Breast cancer. She had been gone 18 years by the time that letter hit the carpet in front of me. I almost put it back. I almost told myself I would read it later, at home, alone, with time to absorb whatever she had needed to say. In the end, I folded it once more and tucked it into my clutch and carried it to the party without opening it, because some part of me understood that whatever she had needed to tell me, she had needed badly enough to hide it where only grief would find it. I carried it through dinner. I carried it through Brett's shoulder pat and Paige's curated smile and table 11 and the hallway rehearsal. I did not open it until the speeches were about to begin. Keep watching, because what was in that letter is the piece that explains everything. Why my father said what he said, why I did not respond the way the room expected, and why the most important moment of that night did not come from me at all. I am going to give it to you straight. Not softened, not summarized. The thing my mother needed me to know and had hidden for 18 years in the back of a Bible. Hold on. I slipped back to the quiet hallway before the toast started, and I opened the envelope. My mother had written the letter in the last spring she was alive, when I was 16 and applying. She had hidden it because she could not say it out loud while she was dying. She wrote that the first time I had gone up for a congressional nomination to West Point, I had not simply come up short. My father had seen to it. He had called an old friend in the congressman's office and told them quietly that his own daughter was not officer material and would shame the family in a uniform. The nomination went to another candidate, but my mother had found out. The congressman's aide had told her himself because he could not look her in the eye at church. And so my mother had gone to Pop, and Pop had driven me to the second interview, the one before Senator Dwyer's panel, the nomination my father had never thought to block. And that was the one that carried me into West Point. Pop had known, my mother had known, and they had said nothing because they had known I would make it anyway, and they had wanted me to know myself before I knew the rest. I read that paragraph 4 times standing in a courtroom hallway while my father 2 doors down rehearsed, calling me an embarrassment. It was not contempt. It had never been contempt. It had been sabotage. He had not merely doubted me at 17. He had reached into my life and tried to close the door with his own hand. And I had pried it open without ever knowing he was the one holding it shut. The last line of my mother's letter was simple. "The right people will always know what you are," she wrote, "and your grandfather was the rightest person I ever knew." I closed my hand around Pop's tags through the fabric of the dress. He had said almost those exact words to me the night he pressed them into my palm. She had been quoting him. I stood there holding 2 dead people's faith in me, and I understood what I was going to do with it. Nothing. On purpose. I am going to tell you why that was the strongest choice I have ever made in my life. My father wins by humiliating people in public. That is his only move. It has worked his entire life because everyone around him is either too polite or too dependent to make him pay for it. If I had walked back into that ballroom and done the same thing, read 3 sentences of my mother's handwriting out loud, and detonated his evening in front of 200 witnesses, I would have been a louder version of him. And Pop did not raise a louder version of Walter Upton, so I decided to let the toast happen. I would sit through whatever he had rehearsed. I would stand up quietly when it was over, collect my coat, and leave with my spine straight and my mouth shut, knowing the truth, even if no one else in that room ever did. The letter would stay in my clutch. The truth would stay with me. I folded it and went back to table 11 and squared my shoulders. And I want you to know, what happened next was not something I planned, not something I caused, and not something I could have staged if I had tried. Stay with me for 2 more minutes. It is almost here. My father stepped to the microphone. The quartet stopped. Someone clinked a fork against crystal, and 200 faces turned toward the man of the hour. He thanked the room, thanked the company, found Margaret Voss at the head table and gave her a bow that managed to be both humble and proprietary. He talked about 30 years of service, about legacy, about the children he was proud of. He started with Brett, called him the future of the division, a builder, a leader, the steady hand the company would lean on. Brett's face did something complicated and grateful that I had not seen since we were children. My father moved to Paige, praised the foundation, the galas, the millions raised. Paige let one elegant tear sit at the corner of her eye without falling, which is a skill. The donors applauded. The senator applauded. 200 people glowed in the warm bath of a father loving his children out loud. And then his eyes crossed the room toward the back. Toward table 11, I felt the moment before it arrived. The way you feel a wave before it lifts you. And I made the small internal preparation you make when you have decided not to flinch. His eyes stopped on me, and he smiled the smile he saves for the moment before he swings. I want to be precise about what happened next, because for a long time afterward, people described it to me softer than it was, and the softening is its own insult. My father looked directly at me from that stage in front of 200 people, and chose, you could see the decision land, chose the cheap laugh over the easy mercy of skipping me entirely. Some of us build companies, he said. Some of us play soldier. A few people laughed. Not most, but a few is all you need to turn a cruelty into a moment. And then he looked at me with the smile thinned to something I had known my whole life and said the sentence he had practiced in the hallway. Do us both a favor, sweetheart. Leave before you embarrass me. The same words from the kitchen in Wexford. 17 years polished, delivered now to 200 witnesses and a live microphone. I felt every eye in the room swing to table 11. And I want to tell you, it did not land. It landed. I am not made of stone. A thing your father has been telling you since you were a girl does not stop having teeth just because you outgrew the fear of it. For 1 second, the 17-year-old in me reached for her coat to run. But I am not 17. I am a major in the United States Army, and I have stood in rooms where the cost of losing composure was measured in lives. A ballroom full of strangers was not going to be what broke a discipline that war could not. So I did not flinch. I did not weep. I did not fire back. I set my napkin on the table, folded once, and I stood up to leave exactly as I had planned. Spine straight, coat over my arm, chin up, ready to give my father the clean exit he had asked for. Nobody said anything. That is the thing people get wrong about public cruelty. They imagine someone always stands up. Usually no one does. The room just lets it happen because the powerful man is the one signing the checks and renewing the contracts and sending invitations to the next party. And your dignity is not worth their discomfort. I had counted on that. I got my coat and took 1 step toward the side door, and then I took another. And I had made it exactly 1.5 steps when something happened that I had not planned for, that no one in that room had planned for, that stopped every breath in the building at once. From the direction of the head table, from a woman who answered to no one in that building, came a single word. Low. Clear. Absolutely certain. The kind of word that stops a room not by volume, but by weight. Wait. Margaret Voss was on her feet. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. When the founder and chairman of the company stands up during the guest of honor's toast, every head in the room turns. And every head turned. My father turned too, the smile still half on his face, the index card still in his hand. A man who did not yet understand that the floor had shifted under him. Margaret was not looking at him. She was looking at me, across the whole length of that ballroom, with the focused stillness of someone matching a face to a file. She took 2 steps away from the head table. "I'm sorry," she said, into the silence, to me. "I have been trying to place you all evening." She tilted her head. "Stand in the light a moment, would you?" I stepped into the chandelier light. She studied my face the way you study a photograph you have seen before, in a very different context. In a briefing room, maybe. At the bottom of a report stamped in red. Her eyes widened just slightly. Something moved across her face that I can only describe as recognition arriving all at once. "I know you," she said softly. Then louder, clear enough to reach table 11 and the stage and the senator, and every person who had just watched my father call me a low-ranked soldier. "Your Major Upton." The room did not gasp. It did something quieter and worse for my father. It froze. 200 people held still in the exact instant of understanding that the woman at the back table, the embarrassment, the punchline, shared a last name with the man at the microphone, and that the chairman of the company had just called her Major. My father's hand opened. The microphone hit the floor. The feedback squeal was the only sound for 3 full seconds. Margaret Voss walked toward me, unhurried, until she was close enough to speak without performing, though the whole room strained to hear. "Major Heather Upton," she said. "Spring of this year, the intrusion into the Sentinel program." She watched my face, because she had earned the truth and my father had not. I gave her a small nod. "I was briefed personally," she told the room, turning so they could all hear. "We were 9 minutes from losing a classified federal program that this division has staked its entire future on. If that program had been compromised, Voss Hartley does not survive the year. 2,000 jobs, this building, that pension you are all here tonight to celebrate." She let it sit. The work was sealed at the time. The names came to a few of us later in a closed briefing, a name and a service photograph I have apparently been carrying in the back of my mind all evening. The officer who led the team had refused public credit because the mission still mattered more than the medal. She looked at me. "That was you?" It was not a question. I held her eyes and said the only thing the moment required. "It was my team, ma'am. I had the privilege of leading them. That was all. No flourish. No turn toward my father. I did not point at anyone or raise my voice. I confirmed a true thing to the one person in that room with the standing to receive it. And the truth did the rest, the way truth does when it finally gets a witness with enough weight to make it stick. 200 people quietly rewrote the whole evening in their heads. The low-ranked soldier was the officer who had saved the company funding the party. The embarrassment was the reason the man at the microphone still had a pension to retire on. My father stood beside the fallen microphone with his mouth open, and for the first time in my life, I watched Walter Upton be unable to find the next thing to say. Brett had gone the color of paper. His entire net worth in this family was built on me being nothing, and the foundation had just dropped out of the sky in front of the exact woman he had spent all night trying to impress. Paige had both hands at her mouth. Maddie, my 12-year-old niece, was crying and grinning at the same time. And I stood there in my borrowed dress, completely calm, my coat still over my arm, and felt the strangest thing. Not triumph. The room expected triumph. I did not want it. I had stopped needing this room's verdict a long time ago. I just stood in the light my mother had promised me and let them see me, and that was enough. My father found his voice eventually, which was the worst thing that could have happened to him. He scrambled. He said, "Folks, I think there has been a misunderstanding. Of course I am proud of her. My daughter, the major, I was. That was just a little family ribbing." He laughed and it cracked. No one laughed with him. He turned to Margaret Voss like a man appealing to a judge. "She gets her grit from me," he said. "I always pushed her to be tough." And that was the moment he tried to fold me into his own story, to stand in the light I had earned and call it his workmanship. His voice kept rising because the room would not give him warmth back, and the colder it stayed, the louder and faster he got. Insisting, explaining, reaching. A great man coming apart at the seams of his own retirement in front of everyone he had invited to watch him win. I stood completely still through all of it. He got louder and I got quieter. And somewhere in the middle, the power in that room crossed from the man with the microphone to the woman with the coat over her arm. Everyone felt it cross, even the people who could not have named the second it happened. I waited for my father to run out of words. It did not take long. They had never been his real strength. They had only ever been his weapon. When he finally stopped, I said one word. "Dad." Just that, quietly, and it carried to every corner because the room was that still. I told him that he had spent 30 years teaching this family that a uniform meant a person had run out of better options. I told him I had not run out of options. I had chosen this one. At 17 in his kitchen, while he told me I would embarrass him. And I had chosen it every single day since, in rooms he would never have the clearance to hear about. I told him he had tried to take it from me once, and I let that sentence sit, soft, with no letter waved in the air and no names named. Just enough truth between us that he knew exactly what I meant, and the room only knew that it meant something. His face told them the rest. "So no," I said. "I will not stand here and be your grit. I will not be the daughter you finally noticed the minute she turned useful in front of your boss. I didn't come to be claimed. I came to say goodbye, and I'm glad I got to do it with the lights on." I picked up my clutch with my mother's letter still folded inside it, unread to all of them. Mine. Margaret Voss spoke once more before I went, and she said it for the room, not for me. "Major Upton," she said. And she said the rank slowly so everyone could hear it settle into place. "On behalf of a company, you will never be allowed to take public credit for saving. Thank you for your service. The door is always open at Voss Hartley. Though I suspect," she added, with the driest glance toward the stage, "you outrank most of the offers in this room." A few people laughed. Real this time, not at me. The senator stood and shook my hand on the way to the door. The two donors who had laughed at my dress now wanted to talk to me, and I let them not get the chance. The bartender, the older man with the marine ring, came to attention behind his bar and held it until I had passed. One old soldier saluting another with the only thing he had. I stopped once more for Maddie, who had pulled free of her mother and caught my hand at the edge of the room. "Are you really a major?" she whispered, fierce and 12 years old. I knelt to her level the way Pop used to kneel to mine. "Really," I said. "And you are really good at encryption, so finish that science project." She nodded like it was an order. I suppose it was. I did not storm out. There was no storm in me. I walked the full length of that ballroom at the pace I would walk anywhere, and I went out through the heavy cold door into an ordinary parking lot full of ordinary cars, and the night air hit me clean and quiet and free of all of them. I set my mother's letter on the passenger seat where I could see it and drove north toward Maryland, toward my own small life that no one in that room had ever bothered to understand. And for the first time I could remember, I did not feel small at all. The fallout was quieter than the movies promise and more permanent. People remember that party now as the night Walter Upton humiliated the officer who had saved the company. Two of his oldest colleagues stopped returning calls. Margaret Voss did not extend the consulting offer he had been expecting. Brett's name came off the short list for the promotion he had been circling because the chairman had seen in one evening exactly how he spent his energy. None of that was my doing. I never said another word about any of them. They simply got measured in front of the one person whose measurement counted, and they came up exactly as short as they always had. 3 weeks later, my father sent a text. 4 sentences, none of them the word sorry, but the last one said, "I didn't know about the Sentinel thing," which was true, and which was also the whole problem, because he had never once asked. I wrote back 2 lines. If he ever wanted to know his daughter, the real one, the door was open. But I would not be coming to be displayed. Honest and private. Or not at all. He has not answered yet. He might never. I made my peace with that somewhere around the state line on the drive home, and the peace has held. I drove out to Pop's grave the following weekend, the way I do every year around the anniversary. Small stone in a veteran's section, flush with the grass. His name, his years, his rank. Sergeant First Class, the rank my father once called proof of a wasted life. I sat in the grass and told him what happened. The dropped microphone, the chairman, the word major landing in that frozen room. I told him I had not read the letter out loud, that I had let the wrong people stay wrong, the way he had taught me. I took the tags off and held them in the sun, warm from being against me all those years. And then I put them back on. They were still mine to carry. Maddie texts me now about encryption, about which colleges have ROTC, about whether girls can really do what I do. I tell her the truth every time. And here is the only wisdom I have worth passing on, because it is not mine. It is Pop's, which means it is worth more than most things people say at the end of stories. I stopped needing my father to see me the day I understood that the people who loved me already had, and that the right ones always do, exactly when it costs the world something to keep looking away. 1 microphone, 1 frozen room, a father who never learned the rank of his own daughter. If someone in your life has decided who you are and stopped checking, you do not owe them the proof. Let them be wrong. Let your work speak when it is time, and trust that the right people are already watching.